Alex had always loved his quiet suburban neighborhood. The streets were lined with tall oak trees, and every house seemed to have a little garden or a small porch where neighbors would sit in the evenings, chatting and watching the sunset. He had moved here years ago, drawn by the sense of community and the peaceful rhythm of life. It was the kind of place where people knew each other by name, where kids played safely on the sidewalks, and where neighbors helped each other without being asked. Life had been simple and comfortable for Alex. He worked from home most days, enjoying the flexibility to tend to small projects around his house. His weekends were often filled with gardening, morning walks, and sometimes a cup of coffee with neighbors who would stop by to chat. For years, the community felt like a place where everyone looked out for one another, and Alex felt proud to be a part of it. Then one morning, Alex received a letter in the mail. It was from the Homeowners Association, or HOA, a group responsible for managing the neighborhood's shared spaces and enforcing rules. Normally, their letters were about simple things like maintenance schedules or reminders about community guidelines. But this one was different. It said that the HOA fees were going up. Not a small increase, but a large one that would affect every homeowner significantly. Alex frowned as he read the notice. He knew that fees sometimes went up to cover unexpected costs or improvements, but this seemed excessive. The letter explained that the increase was due to various projects and rising costs, but it didn't provide much detail. The numbers didn't add up in Alex's mind. Why would the fees double without any clear plan or explanation? He felt a mix of frustration and disbelief. He had always paid his dues on time and followed the rules. This sudden hike seemed unfair. He decided to bring it up with some neighbors to see if they had received the same notice. At the community park, he ran into a few familiar faces. They too had received the letter. Some shook their heads in resignation, saying things like, "It's just the way it is," or "We'll have to pay it whether we like it or not." But Alex couldn't accept that. Something about the way the fees had been raised felt wrong, and he wanted to understand why. Determined to get answers, Alex attended the next HOA meeting. The room was small and crowded with homeowners, all murmuring among themselves about the fee increase. When it was his turn to speak, he politely asked the board to explain the reason behind such a steep rise. The board members, a mix of older homeowners who had served for years, exchanged glances. One of them gave a vague answer about rising maintenance costs and unexpected repairs. Another nodded in agreement, adding that it was simply necessary to keep the neighborhood running smoothly. Alex listened carefully, trying to understand. But the more they spoke, the more he felt brushed aside. The answers were vague, and no one seemed willing to provide any real details. It was as if the board had made the decision without consulting anyone or thinking about the impact on homeowners. Alex left the meeting feeling frustrated and unheard. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was not right, and the idea that the HOA could make such decisions without accountability bothered him deeply. In the following days, Alex began noticing other homeowners quietly grumbling about the fee increase. Some were cutting back on other expenses to cover the new costs. Others were talking about moving, frustrated by the sudden change in their budgets. Alex felt a mix of sympathy and determination. He knew he had to do something, not just for himself, but for the whole community. He started by gathering information. He dug out old letters, receipts, and community newsletters. He compared previous fees with the new ones and tried to understand how the money was being used. The numbers didn't make sense. Some projects listed as costly seemed minor, and there were expenses that didn't have clear explanations. Alex's curiosity turned into concern. He began keeping a detailed record of everything he found, noting down inconsistencies and questions he wanted to ask the board. Alex also started talking to his neighbors more. He realized that many people felt the same frustration he did, but didn't know how to respond. Some were hesitant to speak up, worried about creating conflict. Others had tried asking questions at previous meetings but had been dismissed. Listening to their stories gave Alex a clearer picture of the problem. It wasn't just about money. It was about transparency, fairness, and trust. One evening, as Alex sat on his porch reviewing his notes, he felt a spark of determination. He knew he couldn't ignore the issue or accept the board's vague explanations. He wanted to understand the full story behind the fee increase, and he wanted the board to be accountable. At the same time, he realized that simply complaining or questioning them in meetings might not be enough. He needed a plan, something that would give him the knowledge and power to make a real difference. Alex began reading more about how HOAs operated, learning about their rules, governance, and finances. He discovered that while the board had authority over certain decisions, there were checks and balances in place. Homeowners could vote, attend meetings, and in some cases even take control of management decisions. The more Alex learned, the more confident he felt. He realized that the community didn't have to accept the fee increase blindly. There were steps they could take, but it would require persistence, research, and courage. As days passed, Alex's frustration grew alongside his determination. He still enjoyed the quiet moments in his neighborhood, but now they were accompanied by a sense of purpose. Every conversation with neighbors, every document he reviewed, every meeting he attended became part of a bigger picture. He was no longer just a homeowner reacting to an unexpected expense. He was someone preparing to understand, challenge, and possibly change the system that affected everyone around him. By the end of the first week after the notice, Alex had made a decision. He would not sit back and let the HOA make arbitrary decisions. He would gather evidence, talk to the community, and find a way to ensure fairness and transparency. It was not just about the fees anymore. It was about standing up for what was right and making the neighborhood a place where everyone could trust the system. Alex went to bed that night with a restless mind, thinking of meetings, letters, and strategies. He knew the road ahead might be challenging, but he also felt a quiet excitement. For the first time, he realized that frustration could be a catalyst for action. The sense of injustice that had bothered him so deeply was now fueling a plan that could change not only his own situation, but the future of the entire community. And with that thought, Alex finally drifted to sleep, ready to take the first steps toward making a difference. After deciding he would not accept the fee increase without answers, Alex began his quiet investigation. Each morning, he would sit at his kitchen table with his laptop, sipping coffee, reading through community newsletters, old HOA meeting minutes, and financial reports. It was not easy. Some of the documents were confusing, filled with jargon and numbers that didn't make sense at first glance. But Alex was patient. He knew that understanding the situation fully was the first step toward solving it. He started to notice patterns. Certain expenses seemed unusually high, like maintenance projects that cost more than they should have. Payments had been made to contractors who rarely seemed to do any visible work. Other homeowners had mentioned noticing these things too, but no one had spoken up publicly. Alex realized that the board was acting without much transparency. It wasn't necessarily illegal, but it was unfair. The money from the community was not being managed properly, and homeowners were paying the price. Alex decided to talk to more neighbors. Some were hesitant at first, worried about getting involved or causing tension, but Alex's calm, straightforward approach helped them open up. People shared stories of small frustrations they had ignored for years, garden maintenance that never happened, common areas that were poorly managed, and fee increases that seemed to come out of nowhere. Listening to them, Alex understood that the problem was bigger than just one fee increase. It was about a system that allowed decisions to be made without accountability. One neighbor who had lived in the community for decades gave Alex some advice. If you want things to change, you have to understand the rules and work within them. You can't just complain. You need a plan, they said. This advice stuck with Alex. He realized that he could not rely on anger alone. He needed knowledge, strategy, and careful preparation. Alex spent days learning about the HOA's structure and governance. He discovered that while the board had authority, homeowners had rights too. They could attend meetings, vote on certain decisions, and in some cases even challenge the board's choices. He also found that the HOA hired a management company to handle day-to-day operations. If he could understand how this company worked, he could find ways to influence decisions more directly. Every new piece of information gave him a small spark of hope. As he dug deeper, Alex created spreadsheets taking careful notes of inconsistencies he found in the financial records. He marked questionable expenses, missing explanations, and patterns that didn't add up. It was a meticulous process, and he spent many nights working under the dim light of his desk lamp. It was exhausting work, but Alex felt a sense of purpose. He was no longer just a frustrated homeowner. He also started attending more community events and casual gatherings. While some people went simply to socialize, Alex paid attention to conversations, learning about residents' concerns and experiences. These discussions helped him understand how decisions by the HOA affected real people. A young couple complained about the playground equipment that had been promised years ago, but never installed. Another neighbor mentioned that a common garden had been neglected for months despite being part of the fee budget. Each story reinforced Alex's sense that something needed to change. As Alex's understanding of the HOA deepened, he began to think about possible solutions. Simply confronting the board again felt insufficient. He needed leverage, a way to influence decisions at a structural level. He learned about options like joining the board, running for leadership positions, or even buying influence in the management company. It was a bold idea, one that required planning, resources, and patience. But Alex felt that it might be the only way to ensure fairness and transparency. During this time, Alex also improved his communication skills. He practiced explaining complicated details to neighbors in simple, clear terms. He learned how to present facts without anger, how to listen carefully, and how to build trust. These skills proved valuable because he realized that changing the HOA system wasn't just about numbers and rules. It was about people. Neighbors needed to understand the problem and support the solution for any change to work. Weeks passed, and Alex began to see small successes. A few neighbors who had been hesitant at first started sharing their own observations and concerns with him. Together, they reviewed documents, compared notes, and brainstormed possible strategies. Alex felt a growing sense of solidarity. He was not alone in wanting fairness. Many people quietly hoped someone would take action. At the same time, Alex faced moments of doubt. The work was tedious and the challenges felt daunting. He wondered if the board would simply ignore him, or if his efforts would have any real impact. There were nights when he felt tired and overwhelmed, questioning whether all the effort was worth it. But every time he thought about the unfair fee increase and the frustration of his neighbors, he felt renewed determination. This was bigger than personal annoyance. It was about creating a system where everyone could trust that their contributions mattered. One evening, Alex had an idea that changed everything. He realized that if he could find a way to gain control of the management decisions, he could prevent arbitrary fee increases in the future. It was ambitious, but it made sense. With careful research, preparation, and support from neighbors, it could be possible. He began drafting a plan that included studying the management company contracts, gathering signatures, and exploring legal options. It was a long-term project, but Alex felt ready. By the end of Part 2, Alex had transformed from a frustrated homeowner into someone with a strategy and purpose. He had a clear understanding of the HOA's weaknesses, the support of some neighbors, and a growing sense of confidence. He knew that the road ahead would be challenging, but he also knew that with patience, careful planning, and determination, he could make a real difference. The fee increase was no longer just a problem. It was the catalyst for a journey that could change the neighborhood for the better. Alex had spent weeks gathering information, talking to neighbors, and learning about the HOA system. Now it was time to turn knowledge into action. He knew the key was careful strategy. Acting hastily could backfire, so he decided to move quietly. Observing the board and understanding the inner workings of the HOA management company before making any bold moves. He started attending every HOA meeting with renewed focus. Instead of asking random questions, he prepared notes and pointed questions about financial reports and past decisions. He noticed that some board members seemed defensive when pressed on details. Others avoided eye contact or gave vague answers. Alex realized that the board was used to homeowners accepting decisions without question. He quietly took note of every inconsistency and every moment where the board faltered under scrutiny. While attending meetings, Alex also worked on building relationships with neighbors. He continued listening to their frustrations and sharing information in a clear, calm way. Slowly, he gained the trust of many homeowners who had felt powerless before. They began to ask his advice on what actions to take and how to respond to board decisions. Alex knew that community support would be essential if he wanted to make real change. He began to understand more about the HOA management company, which handled many day-to-day tasks for the board. Alex studied contracts and found that the company had significant control over financial management and decision-making. If he could influence the company, he could indirectly gain leverage over the board. It was a delicate approach, but Alex felt it was achievable with patience and preparation. Alex reached out to a few contacts he had made in the business world to get advice on negotiating and managing contracts. He wanted to understand the legal and financial aspects before making any move. He also consulted a lawyer experienced in HOA matters, learning how homeowners could legally gain influence over decisions and possibly purchase a stake in the management company. The idea seemed bold, but Alex realized that if done correctly, it could benefit the entire community. During this time, Alex also learned to present ideas persuasively. He practiced explaining complex information in simple terms, so neighbors could understand and support him. He emphasized fairness, transparency, and the long-term benefits for everyone in the community. This approach helped him gain more allies. People who had been hesitant to speak up before now felt encouraged to join him, providing a quiet but growing network of support. With the foundation in place, Alex began to draft a plan of action. He listed small, achievable steps that would build toward a bigger goal, gaining control of decisions to prevent unfair fee increases. First, he focused on gathering enough support from homeowners to influence board decisions. He prepared to attend meetings not just as a concerned homeowner, but as someone ready to take initiative. He planned to present clear evidence of mismanagement and offer practical solutions that would appeal to both board members and neighbors. Alex also reached out to a few senior residents who had influence within the community. He approached them privately, explaining his ideas and the potential benefits for everyone. They were cautious at first, concerned about causing conflict, but Alex's careful preparation and clear reasoning convinced them to quietly support his efforts. Their backing gave him more confidence that the plan could succeed without creating unnecessary tension. He began exploring the possibility of gaining a financial stake in the HOA management company. Alex knew it would be a sensitive negotiation, so he carefully reviewed the company's financial statements and contracts. He also sought advice from financial experts to understand the risks and benefits. The idea was ambitious, but Alex felt that with the right approach, it could give him the leverage needed to implement fair policies and prevent arbitrary fee increases. Meanwhile, Alex continued to engage with the community, organizing informal gatherings to discuss neighborhood concerns. These were not confrontational meetings, but opportunities for neighbors to share experiences and ideas. Alex listened more than he spoke, making sure people felt heard. By creating a space for open communication, he strengthened community trust and built a network of allies who would support any positive change. As Alex prepared for the next HOA meeting, he felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. He had spent weeks gathering evidence, consulting experts, and building relationships. Now he needed to present his case in a way that would be compelling and persuasive. He practiced explaining the financial inconsistencies and management issues clearly, emphasizing fairness and transparency rather than personal frustration. He also prepared suggestions for practical improvements that would benefit the entire community. On the day of the meeting, Alex arrived early, reviewing his notes one last time. He noticed a few neighbors arriving with supportive smiles, signaling that they were ready to back him up. When the meeting began, Alex listened carefully, letting the board speak first. When it was his turn, he calmly presented his findings. He pointed out specific examples of mismanagement, explained how certain decisions had led to unnecessary expenses, and suggested realistic solutions that could save money while improving the community. The board members shifted in their seats, some looking surprised, others uncomfortable. Alex could see that they were not used to being questioned so thoroughly. He maintained a respectful tone, emphasizing that his goal was not to attack but to create fairness and transparency. Neighbors nodded in agreement, quietly supporting his points. The room felt different. For the first time, homeowners were actively engaged, and the board could not ignore the growing concern. After the meeting, a few board members approached Alex privately, asking questions and seeking clarification. It was a small step, but it showed that his approach was working. He also received messages from neighbors thanking him for speaking up and sharing information. Alex realized that careful preparation, community engagement, and respectful communication were already starting to make a difference. By the end of Part 3, Alex had transformed from a concerned homeowner into someone actively shaping change. He had gathered evidence, built a network of supporters, and begun exploring ways to gain influence over decisions. While challenges remained, Alex now had a clear path forward. He understood that persistence, careful planning, and community support were essential to achieving his goals. The next phase would require even more courage and strategic thinking, but Alex felt ready to take the next step toward fairness and transparency in his neighborhood. Alex had spent months preparing for this moment. He had gathered evidence, consulted experts, and gained the support of many neighbors who shared his concerns. Now it was time to take decisive action. The goal was clear. He wanted to gain control of the decisions that affected the community and ensure that fees were fair and transparent. But he knew the process would require patience, careful communication, and confidence. He began by arranging meetings with a few key stakeholders in the HOA management company. These were individuals who had influence over contracts, budgets, and day-to-day operations. Alex approached them respectfully, explaining his vision for a more transparent and community-focused system. He emphasized that his interest was not personal gain but fairness for all residents. The management company representatives were cautious at first but appreciated his thorough preparation and the fact that he spoke with clarity and respect. Alex also reached out to neighbors again, this time encouraging them to attend the upcoming HOA meeting. He explained that collective voices would be stronger and that everyone had the right to demand transparency and fairness. People who had been hesitant before now felt empowered. They understood that Alex had spent time analyzing records and developing solutions, and they were ready to support his approach. When the meeting began, the room was filled with a sense of anticipation. Board members could feel the energy shift as more residents attended than ever before. Alex waited patiently for his turn, observing the dynamics and noting the reactions of both the board and fellow homeowners. When he spoke, he presented his findings clearly and calmly. He outlined specific examples of mismanagement, explained how certain decisions had led to unnecessary expenses, and suggested practical solutions that could save money for everyone. The board members listened, some visibly uncomfortable. Alex made sure to maintain a respectful tone, avoiding blame or personal attacks. He framed his points as opportunities for improvement, highlighting how the community would benefit from better transparency and accountability. Neighbors nodded in agreement, reinforcing his message without saying a word. After presenting his findings, Alex proposed a bold plan. He would make a formal offer to buy a controlling stake in the HOA management company. This was not a hostile move, but a strategic one. By having influence over the company, he could ensure that decisions were made fairly and fees were reasonable. He explained that this would benefit the entire community by creating a system that prioritized homeowners' interests rather than arbitrary decisions. The board members reacted with surprise and resistance. Some were dismissive, believing that Alex's idea was unrealistic. Others asked questions about his intentions and the financial implications. Alex remained composed, answering each question with clear, factual responses. He emphasized the transparency of the process and how it would improve trust between the board, the management company, and residents. His calm and well-prepared answers began to change the tone of the room. Several neighbors stood up to voice their support. They shared experiences of feeling frustrated by past decisions and expressed hope that Alex's plan could create a better system. Their voices added weight to Alex's argument. The energy in the room shifted from tension to cautious optimism. The board members realized that ignoring the situation was no longer an option. The community wanted real change. Over the next few weeks, Alex engaged in detailed negotiations with the management company. He carefully reviewed contracts, sought expert advice, and structured a proposal that was fair and feasible. He communicated openly with the board and homeowners, explaining each step and keeping everyone informed. Transparency became a key principle in his approach, building trust and credibility with all parties involved. Finally, the negotiations concluded. The management company agreed to sell a controlling stake to Alex under terms that ensured community benefit. The board, initially skeptical, reviewed the proposal and, after legal consultation and a community vote, accepted the plan. Alex had achieved what many thought impossible. He had gained influence over the HOA management company, giving him the ability to guide decisions fairly and responsibly. With this new authority, Alex immediately focused on implementing changes that would benefit residents. He reviewed budgets and expenses, identifying areas where costs could be reduced without compromising quality. He ensured that maintenance projects were prioritized effectively, and that communication with homeowners became consistent and transparent. Regular newsletters and meetings kept residents informed, fostering a sense of community and trust. Alex also worked with the board to establish clear guidelines for decision-making. Any future fee increases would now be justified with detailed explanations, budgets, and input from homeowners. This new system prevented arbitrary decisions and empowered residents to have a voice in matters that affected their daily lives. The neighborhood began to notice changes quickly. Maintenance improved, common areas were better cared for, and homeowners felt included in discussions. People who had been frustrated and resigned now felt a renewed sense of pride and connection to their community. Alex's efforts had transformed the HOA from an opaque, controlling system into one that served the interests of the residents. Despite the success, Alex remained humble. He recognized that change was a continuous process and that he needed to maintain transparency and fairness. He continued to listen to neighbors, learn from experiences, and make adjustments as needed. His focus was not on power or control, but on creating a system that was accountable, respectful, and beneficial for everyone. By the end of Part 4, Alex had accomplished a remarkable feat. Through careful planning, community engagement, and strategic action, he had turned frustration into empowerment. The HOA, once a source of tension and dissatisfaction, was now under his guidance, operating with transparency, fairness, and respect for homeowners. Alex had proven that determination, preparation, and a commitment to the greater good could create meaningful change, benefiting not only himself, but the entire neighborhood. With the controlling stake in the HOA management company secured, Alex turned his focus to improving the neighborhood and maintaining fairness. The feeling of accomplishment was satisfying, but he knew that the real work had just begun. He wanted to ensure that the changes he had worked so hard to implement would last, and that every resident would feel included and heard. Alex started by organizing a community meeting to introduce the new approach to governance. He explained clearly how decisions would be made from now on, emphasizing transparency, communication, and fairness. He highlighted how fees would be used responsibly, and he invited homeowners to ask questions, express concerns, and provide suggestions. The atmosphere was positive, with neighbors appreciating the openness and the chance to be involved in decisions that directly affected their lives. Over the following weeks, Alex worked with the board and the management company to review the neighborhood budget. He identified areas where money could be saved and redirected towards projects that directly benefited residents. Playgrounds were repaired, gardens were maintained, and shared spaces were improved. Neighbors began to notice the changes immediately, and the mood in the community started to shift. People felt proud of their neighborhood once again. Alex also introduced regular updates to keep residents informed about projects, budgets, and upcoming decisions. Monthly newsletters and email updates became the norm, and meetings included clear agendas with time for questions and discussions. Residents appreciated the transparency, and more people became involved in community matters. The sense of trust that had been missing for years was slowly being restored. As improvements continued, Alex also focused on building stronger relationships among neighbors. He organized small gatherings, community barbecues, and cleanup days. These events were not just about work. They were about creating connections and a sense of belonging. People who had previously felt frustrated and disconnected now participated with enthusiasm, sharing ideas and contributing to the betterment of their community. One of Alex's priorities was to ensure that the lessons learned from the past were never forgotten. He worked with the board to implement guidelines for decision-making that required clear justification for any changes, especially related to fees. Any future increases would have to be explained in detail and discussed with homeowners before approval. This system prevented arbitrary decisions and reinforced accountability within the HOA. Neighbors began sharing their appreciation for Alex's efforts. Some mentioned that they had considered leaving the neighborhood due to frustration over previous mismanagement. Others said that they now felt more secure and confident in the leadership. The sense of community pride was returning, and Alex realized that the journey had not only improved finances and maintenance, but also strengthened relationships and trust. Despite the success, Alex remained humble and grounded. He continued to listen to neighbors, encourage participation, and adjust plans based on feedback. He knew that the role was not about control or authority, but about service to the community. This mindset earned him respect and made it easier to maintain harmony and cooperation among residents and board members alike. Alex also used this experience as a personal lesson in persistence, strategy, and fairness. He reflected on how initial frustration had evolved into careful research, planning, and eventual action. The journey had required patience, courage, and the willingness to engage with others thoughtfully. Looking back, he realized that the challenge had transformed him as much as it had transformed the neighborhood. The positive changes were visible everywhere. The streets felt more vibrant. Gardens flourished, playgrounds were full of children laughing, and neighbors greeted each other warmly. The HOA, once a source of tension and mistrust, had become a tool for improvement and community empowerment. Alex's careful leadership ensured that residents felt included and valued in every decision, creating a lasting sense of fairness. As weeks turned into months, the neighborhood continued to thrive. Alex maintained open communication channels and encouraged homeowners to participate in decisions. By consistently prioritizing transparency and fairness, he created a model that could be sustained in the future. Residents were no longer passive participants. They felt ownership over their community, leading to a collaborative and supportive environment. One afternoon, as Alex walked through the neighborhood, he noticed neighbors chatting and laughing, children playing safely in the yards, and gardens looking well-kept and lively. He felt a quiet satisfaction, knowing that the effort had paid off. The journey from frustration to empowerment had not been easy, but it had been worth every step. He realized that fairness, transparency, and community engagement were more powerful than frustration and complaint alone. In the evenings, Alex sometimes sat on his porch watching the sun set over the neighborhood. He reflected on the journey and how a single challenge and the unfair fee increase had led to a transformation that benefited everyone. The experience had shown him that change was possible when approached thoughtfully, strategically, and with the support of others. It reinforced his belief in the power of persistence, planning, and community. By the end of Part 5, Alex had not only resolved the original problem, but also created a lasting positive impact on his neighborhood. Fees were fair, decisions were transparent, and residents felt included and empowered. The neighborhood was no longer just a place to live. It had become a thriving community built on trust, cooperation, and shared responsibility. Alex's journey demonstrated that one person's determination, combined with careful planning and community support, could create meaningful change that lasts. The story closed with a sense of hope, pride, and human connection, showing that fairness and dedication could truly transform lives.